Hello everyone and welcome back to Deansbury Town. In this video I'll be showing you how I designed and made this Works chimney out of card and paper. I'll walk through the design of the chimney shape, the creation of paper templates and the building of the mock-up. Once the shape and size have been fixed, I'll show you how I got the brick paper to wrap around the chimney and finally adding in the small details. The chimney here is the final part of Deansbury Works. I'll leave a link in the description to my other build videos. So let's get on with building the chimney. If you like this video, please do leave a thumbs up and I'd be interested in hearing your feedback in the comments. There are many different shapes industrial chimneys can take, from cylindrical to tapered, square, octagonal, etc. So there's lots of different prototypes to choose from. I've gone with what could be considered to be one of the more common types, which is the tapered cylinder. I didn't know before I started this project, but there is a technical name for this shape, known as a frustum. I wasn't really sure how to get the tapered shape right for the chimney, and I wanted a neat finish, so rather than make it up as I went along, I did a bit of research and found a number of websites that show you how to make this shape. This website here shows you all the maths you need to know to create the tapered cylinder shape, starting with just three basic bits of information. They are the radius at the top, the radius at the bottom, and the overall height of the chimney. From these three pieces of information we can calculate all we need to know to draw out this shape in 2D. I copied the formulas required into a spreadsheet, which made it easier to make adjustments. Once I'd done the calculations, I set about transferring the measurements into Inkscape. It may have been easier to do this using some CAD software, and I'm sure there's a better way of doing it in Inkscape, but this is what I did and it worked out for me. I took the top diameter and the base diameter from my calculations and drew two concentric circles. I then drew a vertical line from the centre of the circle to the edge, duplicated it, and rotated it by the angle from my calculations, still centered on the center of the circles. This gave me the sides of the outline. The top and bottom curves are then formed by using a Bezier pen to join the sides along the arc of the circles. As I said, I'm sure there must be a better way of doing this, but if you keep the curve points close together, the accuracy is good enough for what we need. The completed outline can then be removed from the guidelines, saved as a PDF and printed out. I then used the printout to make a paper mock-up of the chimney, and this to me shows the benefits of making a mock-up the first time you try something different. Despite having an engineering degree, I still managed to get my radius and my diameter mixed up, resulted in this chimney which is clearly far too wide for the works. However, it proved the basic concept. After digging out my textbooks to try and remember the difference between the radius and the diameter, I used a bit of trial and error and drew a few different top and bottom sizes and picked the one that looked to me to have about the right amount of taper and fitted in the space available. I wanted something that was a decent size but didn't look out of proportion with the rest of the buildings around it. It resulted in this as the final size and shape, which I think fits the job nicely. The next challenge was how to get the brick courses to remain horizontal around the perimeter of the chimney and to meet up at the join when I applied the paper wrap. To do this, I used the outline for the mock-up chimney and brought this into Photoshop, and then in a different layer added the brick texture. Unfortunately, I didn't record this process and I only have Photoshop on my old laptop, which is incredibly slow, and I gave up after wasting half an hour trying to get that to start up. So instead of recreating that process, I've found this handy web app which allows you to open the files to give you an idea of what I did. So this is www.photop.com, and it appears to open up my old Photoshop CS3 files fully. So we've got the different layers here. We've got the brick layer and we've got the outline layer here separately. So with the bricks as a flat sheet, what I did was I used the transform and warp tools and just gently stretched the sides of the brick to allow the courses to run alongside the guides that I'd made at the top. Not used this software before, so I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing. As you can see here, if I zoom in very closely, I gently stretch the brick paper so that the top course here followed the outline of my chimney. Similarly, at the bottom here, the grey outline follows the course of the bricks. I also tried as carefully as I could to keep the sides here as parallel as I could to the verticals of the brick course. However, I tried to avoid too much stretching and squashing, which I think was helped by the relatively gentle taper of the chimney. I don't think this would have worked with a very steep taper or something like a bottle kiln with its sort of extra curvature, if you like. So when this was done, I printed this out in black and white, cut it out and tested it. Thankfully it worked very well, the courses lined up well, so then I printed it out in colour for the real thing. The base layer of the chimney was then printed directly onto thin card and cut out. Anything heavy in this would not roll up well, and this card gave enough rigidity for the model. Using basic acrylic paints, I then painted the inside of the chimney black to represent the years of soot build-up and to remove any white areas. I rolled the card around the tube from my tripod to help give it some curvature to help encourage the card to form this cone shape and to try and stop it springing out when I applied the glue. Contact adhesive was then used to glue the tab to the inside of the chimney to give a quick bond. A few presses with the roller and a strip of tape were used to hold it in place and smooth out the join a little. I then fitted a circle of 2mm card to the base to give strength and a bigger surface to attach the chimney onto its base. The next step in the build was to cut out and attach the brick paper to the chimney. I first cut this out oversized to allow a margin of error when attaching. And as with the base layer, I rolled the brick paper with the tripod tube to introduce a curve to help with the gluing. I then test fitted the paper around the chimney and trimmed off the excess to leave a neat joint. As with all my builds, the edges of the brick paper were then touched in with a combination of watercolour pencils and Sharpies to hide any exposed edges of the paper. I could then apply a generous coat of Pritt stick to the back of the brick paper, and then this was carefully attached to the chimney base layer, and the use of Pritt stick just allows a little bit of movement and freedom in getting the paper in the correct position. Once I was happy the paper was correctly aligned, I then carefully went round the perimeter of the chimney, just smoothing the paper out and attaching the glue as I went to ensure a nice even finish and no bubbles. Although this was quite a time-consuming process, I'm really pleased with the way it's turned out. The warped brick paper especially fits the chimney curvature really nicely and gives it a nice looking finish, as you would do with the real thing. Next job was to add the final details to the chimney. These comprised of some stone capping rings and some brick string courses fitted underneath. The capping was made of 2 rings, a smaller and a larger, both cut from card, with the inner diameter matching that of the chimney. These were then sanded down to remove any edges and then glued one on top of the other. The inside diameter of these matched the inside of the chimney and gave a nice stepped effect at the top. I mixed up some paint using some Vallejo colours, a light brown, a grey and a white, and just until it looked like a nice stone colour. And these were then brush applied to the cardboard rings. The string courses were then made of 4 separate layers of stretcher course brick paper, each one with one less course than the previous to create the stepped effect. So here we have a layer of 4 courses, and then I glued the 3 courses to the top of that with the edges lining up at the top, and then repeated for the 2-layer piece and then the 1-layer piece. I did then spend some time while the glue was setting making sure all the courses were nice and straight. Not easy to see, and unfortunately my head did obscure most of the video, but you get the idea, and it does make for a really nice neat finish. Once this glue had dried, I then test fitted it around the chimney to make sure I got it long enough, and then trimmed it to suit. I then glued the banding round the chimney, touched up the white edges, and then applied the capping layer to finish off the chimney. And here's a close-up of the finished detailing around the top of the chimney. I've not done much detailing with brick papers before, but I'm really happy with how this worked out. I was a bit worried the paper would be a bit thin, but I think it's come out just right. Next job was to build a base for the chimney. I chose to keep this relatively simple and just make it into a cube. So I sketched this out in Inkscape. First off, I did a plan view, side view and front view, with each of the colours representing a different building element. So the dark red here is the sides, corresponding here with the same on the front view, and in between those is a front panel, and on top we have the roof and the plinth. From here I broke this down into the constituent parts, keeping the same colours. 2 side walls, front wall, a back wall, base and top, and then a plinth. The plinth sits over the top of the side walls to give an overhang. And then from these I could make my templates here to cut out and mount to cardboard. Then I was able to make my cover layers for both the brickwork and then the plinth that sat on top. The base layers were then printed onto 2mm grey cardboard, cut out with a sharp knife, and then assembled using PVA glue and this handy scale model scenery right angle jig. I find this gives a nice finish and helps keep everything nice and square and aligned. Because the chimney base was going up against another wall, I could use a single wrap that went round all 3 visible sides, and therefore I could assemble this as a complete cube with the front and back nestling in between the sides of the base, which made for a nice, quick and easy construction. I then cut the wraps out of the photo paper. I'd pre-marked the scoring positions here to give a nice crisp edge, and because I'd made this out of one piece, this was a relatively quick and easy job to apply this to the base. Similarly with the plinth layer, this was cut out from the photo paper, and I went round all the edges of the plinth base layer and the cover layer and just coloured in the exposed edges to prevent any white paper and card from showing. This was then wrapped around the plinth and fitted on top of the base. So here you can see the difference between the original chimney from the Scale Scenes kit and the scratch built one I've made during the course of this video. It has taken quite a long time and a lot of effort, but I'm really pleased with the result. I think it suits the building a treat. And that concludes this video. If you've enjoyed it, please do leave a like and a comment, and if you'd like to see more of these type of videos, please do subscribe. In the next video I'll be showing you how to ladder a chimney Fred Dibner style. Hope to see you then. Bye for now.